Hi, everyone. So welcome to the workshop for this evening. My name is Annabel. I'm the holistic psychotherapist and life coach at Illuminations in GLT. So first of all, I'd like to thank you all for being here this evening. So I can see that there's no cameras on. So what we'll do is we'll run this as a workshop. So it'll just be me doing most of the talking. I've got a few activities for you to do as well. If anyone has any questions, you can either just speak in the session, because I can see that it's quite a small group, or what you can also do is put your question in the chat function, and then what I'll do at the end of the session is I'll go through all of the questions. But yeah, please do feel free to share anything that you think might be helpful for the group, any personal stories, any experiences that you may have had in this particular subject. So today we're going to be speaking about archetypal psychology. So I want to just share, what can I do here? I can share the presentation. So just give me a sec, we'll get that all set up. Okay, so let's get started. So so today we're going to be speaking about archetypal psychology. During the workshop, we're going to learn quite a few things. You're going to be learning about archetypal psychology and the 4 main archetypes. You're going to be identifying your dominant archetypes and how they influence your life. And then hopefully we'll be able to also cover some tools to help you integrate these archetypes and their lessons into your life for more healing, growth and transformation. Well, thank you. I'm happy that you're able to join us as well. I wanted to ask, does anyone have any experience working with archetypes, doing any shadow work, any form of archetypal psychology? And it would be great to hear if anyone does have any experience there. It's a really interesting subject, as you know. Okay, so what are archetypes? Because it's quite an interesting word, isn't it? So archetypes are the underlying patterns of human experience, human behavior, and our psychology. So they're often sort of behind the scenes running the show. So, we have our personality, we have our spirit, we have our behavior, we have all of these different elements that make up the self. And sometimes we have what we call archetypes, which are, their energies, their personalities. There are these different roles that we can play as part of our authentic self. But, sometimes they can also be, things that we might project that aren't necessarily aligned with, how we would really like to interact in the world. So I'll explain a bit more about that in a sec. So the archetypes that we have, they influence how other people see us. This is one of the reasons why it's really important for us to try and understand what these archetypes are like in our life. I don't know if anyone's ever experienced that you may attract very similar people into your life, maybe in relationships, friendships, romantic relationships. You might find that you attract the same type of people. I'm hoping that this would be the same type of positive person. But unfortunately, what we experience a lot of the time with archetypes and when we're doing shadow work is that sometimes more than we would like, we're attracting the wrong types of people, the wrong types of situations, the wrong types of events to ourselves, and we're not really sure why this is happening. So that can be something that's been caused by like a subconscious archetype that you might have. So it's very interesting to start to identify, maybe you're always attracting the same type of partner, maybe you're always attracting the same type of job, and you're thinking, what am I doing that's causing this? Consciously you might be asking for something very different, but yet, more often than not, time and time again, you just keep ending up in the same cycle. So that's something that can be often caused by our shadow and also these subconscious archetypes that we have. So one of the good things about these archetypes is once we start to understand them and integrate them, into our psyche, into our behavior, into our life, then we're able to use that to really grow. So, we can use that energy to help us transform. We can use that energy and that understanding and the lessons that these archetypes hold to help us grow, increase our personal development and improve our relationships. There's this thing that we have, that we say, the archetypes contain lessons within them. So, when you reach that lesson, or when you start to understand what the archetype is trying to teach you, then you're able to move past that. So there's a very famous spiritual teacher called Caroline Myss, and she talks about this a lot in her book called Sacred Contracts. And what she says is that, we have these archetypes, what they're actually there for, and what the purpose of them is kind of serves as like a soul contract. So when we come to this earth, we're given certain spiritual lessons, which I'm sure you've all heard before, certain spiritual lessons that we need to learn. So, it might be something like, maybe you need to learn standing up for yourself, or maybe you need to learn, how to understand like what you want versus what other people want you to be or to do. Maybe you need to understand that with great power becomes responsibility. So, there's all of these different lessons that I think when we come to this earth that, we're supposed to learn. And part of that is it comes through an archetype. So if you want to get, a head start on your personal growth and transformation, one of the best things that you can do is, understand what are my archetypes, what lessons am I here to learn? Try and get it the first time as opposed to the third or the fourth or the fifth time, which happens quite a lot. And then, you can kind of bypass a lot of the pain that some of these archetypes can hold for us. Okay, so that's how archetypes can influence your life. So, we've just been speaking a bit about the spiritual element of archetypes. Archetypes originated in the field of psychology. So Carl Jung, who I'm sure you've all heard of, is one of the kind of fathers of archetypal psychology. Everyone does have their different models. So he spoke about 4 main archetypes that we have. So we've got our persona. So our persona is the mask, okay, how we present ourselves to the world. Okay, and for a lot of people, they're not even necessarily aware, or in the earlier years of your life, maybe you're not aware that you have this persona. So I'm going to give you an example. People that like to joke around a lot, sometimes that can be a mask for things like, maybe they're a bit shy. The real self underneath this mask is maybe a little bit shy. Maybe they feel a bit vulnerable. Maybe they're very sensitive emotionally, which are all wonderful qualities. But for some reason, when they've been growing up, they've been taught that they're not supposed to have those. They're not supposed to have those feelings. They need to be strong, or whatever is going on there, and then that would cause us to develop what we call a social mask. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. This mask is always there, or also there to protect us, and it helps to shield our self-esteem. It helps to shield our emotions. It helps us to feel in a way, safe when we're interacting with other people. The problem with when we have this persona is it does block our authentic self. And I'm sure you've all heard this word everywhere, authentic self. What do we mean by that? We mean that, the raw emotions, your true self, your values, allowing that to shine through. But yes, sometimes, when we've not been given that opportunity, we can hide a lot of that. And the problem again is that, it's a bit energy zapping, right? And then, what you might find, when you start to do this work is that you might have attracted relationships into your life based on your persona, or, based on your archetypes or your shadow. And then as you move into more of an authentic self, you might find that maybe these relationships are not really that suitable for you anymore, because, they were attracted on a basis that isn't, that was partly true at the time, but, it's not fully true for you. And, maybe it's not really a match in many senses, like personality-wise, psychology-wise, energy-wise, it's not really fitting anymore. So that's the first main archetype that we have. It's called the persona. Okay, so the next one we have, like I've mentioned before, is the shadow. So our shadow is our unconscious mind. So that's again going to be, where we've hidden any unattractive or unacceptable parts of ourselves. So again, you imagine, when we're growing up, depending on what society we grew up in, there's a lot to do with gender here as well. What's acceptable for a woman, what's acceptable for a man, anything that doesn't fit within what we're being told or what we accept, that gets put into our shadow. So that's the unconscious. This can be things like emotions. For a lot of people, maybe they're brought up in a way where anger is not acceptable. So that angry part of them then gets forced into the shadow. It's not really integrated into part of their being. It's a part of their behavior, into part of their psychology, their personality. It's not there. It's very much repressed. So this would have an effect, like, maybe you might not have strong boundaries, because again, it's all been repressed, so you're not aware of your natural reactions. Or just to go back to the attraction part, if you have this like anger as part of your shadow, you might actually find that you always attract relationships where the other person's quite feisty, or you think maybe they're quite an angry person. I don't understand because I'm so calm and I'm so nice. Or what's going on there is that part of you is in the shadow and you're attracting based on that. But it's not in your conscious awareness. So it's very interesting to try and identify what's in your shadow. So we'll do a bit about that shortly as well. So Carl Jung had his third archetype as the anima or the animus, which represents our true self. Okay, so not the image, not the the true self that we have. And again, there's part of that he does go into gender again, and he talks about females and women do have a little bit of masculinity about them, but not suppressing that, so allowing that just to be there, which is quite interesting. So not to get too hung up on like definitions and roles there, so just allowing that to be, that's all part of the true self. And again, these things that we discussed before, the things that have been, your authentic self, like who would you be, or who would you have been by now, if you hadn't repressed things, if you hadn't designed yourself around what other people expected of you, that's tapping into the true self there. And it's not to say, that there's something wrong if you have a shadow, or there's something wrong if you have a mask, because again, these are all very valid, safety mechanisms and that we have in order to protect us. And I would say that you would be a bit surprised if someone didn't have a part of a shadow. You'd be a bit surprised if people didn't have personas, because sometimes we need these personas because they help us in work. If you're in like a leadership position, it can help to have this persona of a president, or it might help to have a persona of a comedian if you're in a place where it's very stressful and people kind of rely on you to help them get through the day. So personas are very we've got queen personas. I'm going to get into them in a bit, but these things can be helpful. So it's not to say I shouldn't have this, or that shouldn't be there, or there's something wrong because it's there. But yeah, so that's a bit more about the true self. Okay, so then the next one is the self that we have. And the self here represents what we call unified consciousness. So it's usually represented as a mandala or square or a circle, and then that's all of the different parts here that you can see that we discussed, all brought together in a way that is very authentic, in a way that allows all of these parts to be there. Because I'm saying, while we start to recognize our shadow parts, and while we start to recognize our personas, it's not that we completely get rid of them, it's just that we will start to integrate. So an integration means everything's like in awareness, so you can use it in different ways. That's that. Does anyone have any questions so far? Because I realize that I've been speaking a lot, so you can just let me know. I hope this makes sense, and I'm sure you all start to recognize yourself in some of the things that I'm saying here. Okay, so what are some of the benefits of working with archetypes? So some of the things that we've discussed, so exploring the unknown parts of yourself, that's really fascinating. It increases their self-awareness. You really want to take a deep dive into, your personality. Where did you come from? Why are you the way that you are? What benefits is it bringing you? How is it holding you back? It helps you to really explore. And, once you start to identify your archetypes, you can draw on them. Like, you can be like, okay, well, I need to step into my archetype of queen today because I have to be in this way, right? Or I need to step into my archetype of judge today because I need my critical thinking and I need to use this. And so you can start to really draw on these archetypes to help you move forward and embody a lot more presence and power within yourself. So yeah, encourages positive growth in lots of different areas of life. So I mean, we spoke about spirituality. You can use your archetypes to help you understand, why am I here in this earth, this life, and what am I supposed to be learning? How can I speed that process up so I don't have to go through so many challenges and so many learnings. It's also, encourages positive growth, like we said, self-awareness, emotional intelligence in your relationships, because you can start to attract, better people to you, and when you start to address your archetypes. It can help in like so many different ways. It's empowering, which you've mentioned as well. Understanding yourself at a deeper level, which I mean is also, it's nice when you're able to connect truly with yourself, because if everything's in your subconscious, sometimes you don't realize, you actually don't realize what's happening. So when you're not in tune with your archetypes, when you do have quite a big shadow, yes, it's not in your conscious awareness, but it's coming out in other ways. So, we have what we call in psychology, psychosomatic symptoms. So people that get like IBS, they'll say to you, oh, but I don't feel stressed. But their body's communicating in another way, stomach cramping, things that happen with that, maybe migraines, things like that, can start to happen. You might get anxiety, you might feel sad because you're not really connected to yourself. So again, it can be, there may be a sense of loneliness because, if you're not welcoming yourself, if you're not, there to embrace your authentic self, and you're hiding from yourself, then how are you supposed to connect to yourself, but then also to other people in an authentic way? So it kind of puts barriers up in your relationships as well. So let me just check. Got a message here. Do we always have one archetype that overrides others? So when we do this work, so the Carl Jung archetypes, so you will always have all 4 of them. But then the next set of archetypes that I'm going to get into, that can vary. So you probably have some of them to an extent, but yes, you'll always have 1 or 2 that override others. So we're going to get into that shortly. So I'm not sure what your name is, but it says 80 here. You definitely will, and you'll be able to see, once I start going into some examples, you'll be able to see how they've been prominent in your life. Okay, so that's the main archetypes there. Okay, and I mean that's a lot to do with, as we said, psychological development, your experiences when you were growing up, depending on how strong these are or how weak they are. There's a lot to do with psychology there, behavior. Again, what we said, how you're attracting other people as well. Okay, so these archetypes might sound a bit more familiar to you, especially in a spiritual development sense. So just to answer your question, you probably have one of these should be a lot more prominent. We usually say let's try and work with the main 2 to 3. But I mean, you might have, there's actually probably up to about 100 archetypes that we can think of, but these are the main categories. So let's just go through these a bit. So victim archetype would be, I'm just thinking about the stories, because a lot of this is based on stories. So the victim story would be, bad things always happen to me. I can't do anything right. People are mean. These kind of experiences. And, that comes from maybe having something, where there hasn't been a sense of safety. So then that victim archetype enables you to get other people to help you. So again, it's a survival thing. And, it can be very helpful. And the problem with, the victim wants to be cared for, wants to be nourished, wants to be taken care of, wants to be safe. So unfortunately, when you have this archetype, what you might find is you keep attracting situations, possibly of abuse, situations of abuse of power, where other people aren't treating you fairly or they're taking too much for you. You'll keep attracting that in work, personal life, relationships. You might think, well, I don't understand what I'm doing. Just because you have this archetype. So it's about understanding, what is the lesson here? So the lesson of the victim, it might be personal for you, but, in my experience, usually what's happening with this archetype when it's dominant is that the lesson is about, taking responsibility for your own safety, that you have the ability to take care of yourself and that you have the ability to place boundaries around you. So, when someone has this archetype, there's a lot of, how can we develop boundaries? How can you learn to say no, self-respect, not taking things on that aren't good for you, making sure that everything's balanced. So this would be the victim archetype. So it's a really nice one to work with. But again, as you can see, that it doesn't mean that anything's wrong. It just means that these are the spiritual lessons that you're here to learn. And then, like, for example, we think about the caregiver. So as I'm going through these, maybe you can have a think about, how do these relate to you? Caregiver, I mean, that might be evident, someone's a nurse, a social worker, that might come out, they're a parent, it can come at a healer, it can come out in different aspects of life. You might find that always in your friendships, you're kind of like caring for everyone as if you're a therapist, as if you're their nurse, or, you're always, making sure that everyone's okay. So yeah, and I think, again, the lesson there, they're all about balance. But, we think we have this caregiver personality. What would be the lesson there? The lesson would be, yes, altruism and taking care of other people is fantastic, but not at the expense of yourself. Okay, which I think if there's any people that work in the caregiving industry or have that, it's some, burnout and, having to take that time for yourself is like a big issue because it's not in your nature. So, I mean, that's something to work on there. Avenger is another interesting one. I probably won't go into all of these because otherwise in so much detail, because we might run out of time. So I'll just try and pick a few that I think that might need some clarification. Some of them are quite explanatory. Avengers, people like, I'm going to get you back. I can't believe you did that. You should have said that. And I'm going to make you pay. This is like, this Avenger type that you might notice if someone annoys you, maybe you're thinking these things. Again, what's the lesson what does an Avenger want? If you think, what does the archetype want? There's always a really nice quality behind it, and it's that it's fairness, right? The Avenger wants fairness because what you did isn't fair, so you need to pay for that. So that's how the Avenger thinks. And what's the spiritual lesson there? Is maybe that fairness is required, but maybe it's also forgiveness. There, and that not to necessarily take things into your own hands, and people might need forgiveness in some cases. So I mean, I would say that, I mean, you can also find your own spiritual lessons, but just again, in my experience, I'd say that the Avenger is mainly about forgiveness. Rebel. So Rebel, the Rebel personality type, I mean, that's quite self-explanatory, but just in terms of, what does the Rebel want? The Rebel usually wants to be seen, and that's why, they're creating this. So either the Rebel wants to be seen, and that's why they're creating this, energy and this behavior around them that gets attention, because it's negative attention, but it does get attention. Yeah, so that's what the Rebel wants. But he or she also just wants to be taken care of, right? The Rebel, what do they really want? They really just want to be loved, and to know that everything's okay. And a lot of the time when you see this Rebel archetype, people are maybe acting out of pain. So maybe they're in pain, and they act out. So I mean, it's also important to notice, like, if you have that, what's driving it, and what are the lessons there you need to learn. Again, Martyr, similar-ish to Caregiver. The Martyr, is that self-sacrifice, but a much greater extent to the Caregiver. So yeah, the Caregiver, maybe you might say they want to be liked, whereas Martyr, when you experience this Martyr archetype, a lot of it's to do with you need to experience love from other people, and it's about how can you love yourself and value your own needs there. The hero and the heroine, thinking like Spider-Man, Superman, She-Ra, any of these types of people. Again, likes to come in and save the day. There's a lot of glory there. They like the praise and the admiration. But again, there's a lot of being there for other people, and just to make sure that they're being there for themselves. I've got the Judge here. So some people really have this archetype where they're very judgmental, and like a little bit with the event, similar to the Avenger, but they're really judgmental, and people should behave in this way, and you need to stand in line at the traffic queue, and they get very attached to rules and right and wrong. And again, maybe the lesson there is that everything doesn't need to be so black and white. Maybe we can find a bit of grey, and be careful about judging others, because one day you're also going to be judged. And I think a lot of the time, like, things annoy us about other people that we're actually doing, but we're not aware of it. So I mean, that's part of the shadow that we'll get into soon. I mean, mother, father, you don't have to be a parent. You can just have this really caring, nurturing energy about you. I've got the King and the Queen and the Prince and the Princess. King and the Queen, obviously a bit more of mature, kind of embodied ruling energy. Prince and Princess is a little bit more sort of immature. Maybe when you're in your teens, you might have this kind of bit more of your girl, like a bit more girly. or a bit more boyish kind of energy about you. And the priest and the priestess, again, very interesting. I think there's a lot of us, or a lot of us going around at the moment, you know, teaching spiritual information to people, spiritual lessons, you know, a lot of knowledge, you know, how can we live in better ways? You know, people will go to you for guidance. So that's that. And then just lastly, I forgot to mention here, the wounded healer, that's a really interesting one. So that's when you have had a lot of problems and a lot of issues yourself, you've overcome them, and then you then go on to teach other people. So that's another main archetype, which is quite common at the moment, because, you know, we all have these great platforms where we can teach our lessons. So that's that. So these are the main archetypes. Okay, so I'm going to get you guys to do a bit of work now, if that's okay. Let's have a look. So I've got some questions here for you. If you could do a bit of work while we're here, if anyone has any questions or needs some help, please let me know, because otherwise it's just going to be me giving you this information, and I really want you to, you know, try and integrate some of it while you're here. You know, we've got this time together. Let's try and integrate some of it. So these are the questions here. So if you could try and spend some time identifying at least 2 of your main archetypes. I'm sure you've thought of things, you know, when I've been speaking. So we've got, like, I'm just going to say them again. I should have put, I'll say them again. So we've got the victim, the Avenger, the martyr, the hero, the saint, the mother and the father, the king and the queen, the priest or the priestess, the warrior. Do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put these all in the chat function so that you can access them easier, and then I'll have the questions up. So let me put them in the chat function so you can see them. Oh. Okay, that's not working. Anyway, okay, I'm going to type them for you while you're starting with the questions. Okay, so if you could try and identify at least 2 of your main archetypes, and then you want to start working through these questions. So why are you drawn to this archetype? What does it, how does it represent you in your life? Okay. Okay, so the next one is that you want to write, like, you know, what do you like about this archetype? To me, you might say that it's very feminine, and you might say that maybe it helps you to feel strong. You might say that, you know, it's a nice way to treat other people. So just have a think about, you know, what do you like about this archetype? Okay, and, like, you know, when you're thinking about this archetype, have a think about as well, you know, what do you least like about this archetype? You know, think about how does it make you feel? How does it affect your interactions with other people? What's the energy of it? So, you know, just as an example, like if I chose, what can I choose? If I have a think about here, this victim archetype, you know, what do I like the most about it? It gets people to help you. I like that. And what do I like least about it? It's a bit of a, you know, it's not much of a powerful energy that I'd like to be in. So that would be how you would think about that. Okay, and then the next question is, because sometimes it's good to just think quickly when you do this. So what opportunities in your life have been connected to this archetype? Okay, so like, you know, what people have you met? You know, we say opportunities, but it can also include challenges. What people have you met? What jobs have you got? You know, have you been able to travel? Have you made money? Has it been really stressful? Let's have a look into that and have a think about it. You know, maybe you can write a few things down. So yes, I'm just going to use the victim archetype since we spoke about it before. You know, what opportunities might have enabled you to meet some really nice people. People might have come in to help you with whatever situations you were dealing with. So that could have been an opportunity. A challenge might be something like it has caused people to take advantage of you, or maybe brought some not nice relationships into your life. Okay, and then the next thing that we want to think about is, in what ways does this archetype serve your relationships with other people? Okay, so is it helping your relationships, or is it making your relationships worse, or damaging your relationships, or making your relationships any more challenging? Okay, and maybe you can think about your personal relationships. You can think about some of the relationships that you have at work as well. Think about your relationships with yourself. Can also be quite interesting, you know, because a lot of these archetypes, you know, they can help to boost your self-esteem, but sometimes they can also help to damage our self-esteem, our self-respect, how much we value ourselves. So it's really about, you know, working in a way to understand how much does this archetype serve me or not, because we always work with helpful and not helpful. Okay, and then the last one is that we want to think about is through your relationships, in what ways have your archetypes allowed you to help other people? So this is when we start to get into the lesson part of the archetype. So how is this, in the spiritualist, how has this archetype helped you to help other people? So, you know, like, for example, in the case of the victim archetype, like, it could be that this, you know, having this archetype, or, you know, experiencing this archetype enables you to help other people that also have it. You know, maybe you've worked through it, and that's maybe enabled you to be a lot more empowered. So if you can even just think of like one or two examples here, that would be enough. Just to really try and understand the lessons of the archetype, you know, sort of why have you come here to learn this lesson? How is it helping you? How can you learn and grow from this experience? And then lastly, how is this archetype allowed other people to help you? Because everything, you know, it's energy in, energy out. So, you know, how is having this archetype? It's not that, you know, that you're always going to be helping other people, or that you're always going to be experiencing challenges. It's going to be bringing some good things to you as well. So how has it allowed other people to help you? AT, I don't expect you to share your archetype. So there's a question here. Do you expect us to share? I mean, if you would like to, that would actually be really helpful, just so that I could give, you know, a little bit of a discussion and try and help you with it, but you don't have to. Because I also don't want to put pressure on people to share, but if you would like to share, please do feel free. We could even have a bit of a discussion, like a mini coaching session around it, just to see some of the examples, and then maybe that can be quite helpful for the group. So I'll leave that one with you. You would know. No, that is true. understandable. So just with that said, I actually, because I mean, I've done this, obviously archetype work. I don't really teach anything that I haven't practiced myself. It is really one of the most powerful things that you can do. I understand that, it's in a group situation, and, we are being recorded. Okay. Thank you, Artie. So yeah, I think I'm going to be doing a workshop about archetypes. It's really amazing because what we do during the workshops is we use something called psychodrama, and where you actually act out your archetype. So depending on how many people would be in this group, what we can do is, like, for example, I could get all of the victims together, all of the victim archetypes. I'll get all of the Avenger archetypes together, and they have to like put on a play. It's very interesting. Okay, thank you. It's very interesting. So yeah, or even if there's not other people with your same archetype, you put a play on, and the drama, it's called psychodrama. The drama around it and the acting then enables that to, in therapy, we sometimes, it's nice to see yourself with a bit of humor. And then when you see like almost other people acting out these archetypes that you have, it's very healing, and then you're like, oh wow, I do that, and then it kind of helps it to become integrated in a very gentle way. Rather, it's really, really nice. So I think I'll probably do that next month. So if any of you would like to attend that, it's going to be a bit more personal, a bit more private. Great. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Artie. I would love to have a chat with you. Yeah. So yeah, as I said, I've done a lot of work with this. So Olivia, Psychodrama, and Mythodrama I worked with. So yeah, it is very interesting. So I'd like to hear I'd love to hear from everybody, but let's see. So let's just go through some of these. So I'm not going to read out the names or anything. I can just read out the general archetypes. So we've got priestess and a wounded healer. So again, the priestess, the high priestess is, it makes sense because, there's a spiritual teaching there. The priestess is there to teach. So it's all about integrating lessons, and it's very linked to, as you said, the wounded healer, because, I think that there's a thing to be said, like if you're a Jungian psychologist, there's a thing to be said that, and we can read these things in books, and I'm not saying that we can't learn in that way. If you've gone through something yourself, of course you want to use that knowledge to help other people. So then, in that way, when we have the wounded healer archetype, it can actually be very healing. So the lesson also there is that, how do I use my pain and how do I use my challenges to help other people? So there's a big lesson there that we can use, and we can, use that, the pain and the kind of darkness can then also become an energy and a catalyst for growth and change and healing, and it can become quite a driver, and you probably know yourself, quite a motivator. When we have pain, it can help us to have energy to move forward and to get things done sometimes. So we can use that in the service of other people, which is really nice. Teacher, saint, and caregiver. We've also got here. So yeah, we're working with Illuminations here. So I had an idea that there would be a few wounded healers and caregivers and saints, because that this is the community that we're in. We're all in service, and we all want to help in our own way. So that's really nice. The saint's a nice one, because not always, but the saint might have possibly quite a big shadow. Because when we have this archetype of I'm always helping other people, and I want nothing in return, and this very holy, clear. I'm going to use the color of white to explain the energy there. Sometimes there's there might be some things, or maybe something in the past. There might be some things that we want to address as well, which is quite interesting. And then I'm a caregiver too. Jester is another one that's been mentioned here. So the jester, again, sometimes that's to protect a very sensitive self. Not all jesters do that. I'm just, some in my experience, I've heard that, or we've discovered, sometimes it can be a bit of a defense mechanism, but it's also a leadership position, right? When you have this jokey personality, because people are really counting on you to feel good. The world's a kind of dark place at the moment, and a lot of us are really struggling. So when we meet this person that's really funny, people will gravitate to you. So it's also very caring. You know, I think sometimes when we think about what the jester wants, I think there would be some probably some acknowledgement from other people, and then maybe a little bit of praise. So then something with that would then be to look at how are you acknowledging yourself and how are you praising yourself. So rather than always getting it from outside, just make sure that you're getting enough of that inside as well. I think that's from my perspective. But yeah, as I said, I'd love to meet some of you and chat about this more. Okay, so the last archetype that I wanted to talk about is, which we mentioned before, is the shadow. And you know, we said that when we have this shadow, in addition to these other archetypes that we have, this is one of the main ones. We have the shadow. This is everything that's been repressed. You know, so for example, if you weren't allowed to express anger, and we spoke about that before, that's going to be something that maybe it's been repressed, and it's something that you might be a very nice person on the outside, but inside is something a little bit different, and maybe you're aware of it, but you're not ready to tell other people, or maybe sometimes you're not aware of it either. So you know, that can be one example. I've got another example which is quite funny. So like, for example, I was working with someone and they kept bringing up this word. It's not a polite word, but they kept bringing it. I'm going to make it like a word of other women being nasty. Let's say that, and you know, they're a bit nasty, a little bit of the B word. But they weren't aware that they were actually like that too. It was really funny. So you know, through a lot of care and kind of compassion, and you know, working through that, we were able to let her see that was also part of herself, and the reason why she was so reactive and so disgusted by other people doing that was because it was also in her, but she hadn't recognized it. So this is something that we do when we're not really fully aware of some of the things that are in our shadow. So it's also, you know, one of the parts of working with the shadow that you can really do and really kind of try to maximize is really pay attention to how do you react to other people. You know, when you meet people and they're really annoying, you don't know why they're annoying, but you're just like, oh, you know, it's clashing with your energy, or something that just really don't like them. Try and notice, you know, is there a pattern? Right? Is there, yes, exactly. So someone has just sent me a message here saying the things we dislike most in others are the characteristics that we least like in ourselves. Yes, absolutely. But often we're not aware of that because it's in our shadow. So I'm going to just use an example here. So I grew up in Glasgow. It's a very down to earth place, and I used to get really annoyed when I met people who I thought were maybe a bit arrogant or a bit too posh, or you know, they were certainly, I used to find it quite interesting when I was a lot younger, and then I realized that maybe I was a little bit like that too, actually. So it was quite interesting when you have these realizations, and then you're able to, like, you know, just kind of integrate it into your personality, so and into your way of being, into your energy. So it's very interesting to look at. And again, you know, one of the reasons why I like to do these exercises is because, you know, we have this knowledge and we know the things we dislike most in others are the characteristics we least like in ourselves. But it's about, well, yeah, I know that intellectually, but do I know that, are there still parts of my shadow that I haven't yet realized? How integrated am I? And, you know, it's really about, yes, working with yourself, and yes, having all this knowledge, but it's also really helpful to work with another person. I mean, there's so many different therapists at Illuminations that do lots of different work. It's so important to have that other person there just to, you know, mirror some things back to you that you're saying, just to put you in that environment where you're really able to hear yourself, and, you know, if you can't, then to give you the tools that will enable you to do that. So that's what we do with shadow work. So, you know, I think I mentioned before, you know, when we're not fully integrated, and we have these aspects of our being that, you know, maybe we just don't like, so we've, you know, shoved it away, you know, we've buried it somewhere. Again, it contributes to a lot of anxiety, depression, self-sabotage as well. So, you know, it's really important just to try and meet that shadow and just understand, you know, what's there. You know, it might be something related to something that you've done. It might be related to the way in which you're brought up. It might be related to a relationship or something that you think, a part of yourself, something that you would like to be. So yeah, it's really important just to try and meet that shadow. So let's do a little bit of an exercise. We've got like 15 minutes left. we'll just do a bit of a meditation here. So I've already mentioned, yeah, so I've just got another question here that I'm going to answer. Could the shadow be a different, separate or third archetype than the two? Yeah, so how it works is because I've actually used two different models of archetypes here. That's why, so the Carl Jung archetypes, so there's the four main ones there that everybody has. You know, they're more of like the categories, whereas the other more specific archetypes would be part of your shadow. So the hero and the victim and all of those things that are driving them, all of those things that are, you know, keeping it in the shadow or, you know, making it come out in your behavior, that would be part of the shadow, if that makes sense. So yes, it's separate, but it's also part of it, if that's how I can explain it. And you know, there's why I like this branch of psychology, because it's also very linked to spirituality. There's a lot of what we call exploration. You know, it's not completely, because I also do CBT, which is very defined, very scientific. So how, thanks, I'm glad it makes sense. How we work with this, you know, there is a bit of exploration, it's a little bit subjective. I also try and allow for, you know, different therapists will have different interpretations. You also will as well. And I know a lot of it is like, you know, how can we use it? It's not a diagnosis. It's just, you know, how can we use this to learn some, you know, to self-develop, to learn, to grow, to improve my relationships. So I think, you know, we can be, so I like to be a little bit fluid with these as well. Yes, that's how it works. So let's do a quick meditation, just to, you know, try and meet some of those parts, to acknowledge them. So I think if everyone could close their eyes. Okay, and take some deep breaths. We want to take one big deep breath in for 3 seconds or longer. A deep breath out. Okay, deep breath in. Deep breath out. Okay, I'd like you to think about one of your archetypes that you've identified today. Okay, is it the victim? Is it the hero? Is it the mother? How is this archetype serving you? How does it make you feel? What good experiences has it brought into your life? Okay, and what challenges has it brought into your life? Difficult situations, difficult people, difficult feelings. Let's take some time just to sit with that. Can you maybe put one of your hands on your heart? Okay, we want to acknowledge the lessons that come from this archetype. We want to thank it. I want to say thank you. I forgive you as well. And I love you. You can keep taking deep breaths. We want to also ask for forgiveness, because sometimes these archetypes can cause us to do things that maybe we might not want to do. We might have said the wrong thing. We might have behaved in a way that we didn't really want to. So we want to also say sorry to all the people that these archetypes might have caused us to hurt or even affect in any way. And then I want you to have a think about what could be, if there's any part of your shadow that would like to be acknowledged tonight. Could be shame, could be anger, could be guilt, could be control. If there's anything in there that would like to come up to light, just give it some space to be acknowledged. just pay attention to how you feel in your body. If there's anything going on, maybe you want to just shake a little bit, move your shoulders just to release if there's any negative emotions that are coming up. Okay, and then if you can say to that part of yourself, I love you and accept you just as you are. Okay, I bring you into the light. And I love and accept you just as you are. Okay. And then I'd like to invite everyone just to come back, back into the present. And 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so that was a short meditation just to allow you to just to experience what it's like just to go within, to meet the shadow. It's not really that scary. If anyone would like to come for a session, we can do that in a bit of a longer meditation, 10 to 15 minutes, just to give us that chance to start integrating and start welcoming the different parts of ourselves, so we can feel wholeness and experience what wholeness is like. It's a nice feeling, just when you're in tune with your authentic self. All of these different parts of ourselves, one's here, one might have been left somewhere, and when they're all integrated into a whole, you're able to experience more presence, a deeper sense of being yourself. You're more in touch with your authentic self. So, it's really important to do some of this work. Okay, so I think we're coming to the end of the workshop, so I would just like to ask if anyone has any more questions, or if they'd like to find anything out. As I said, I'll probably do a workshop next month or the month after on archetypal psychology, where you can come and act out your archetypes. It's really, really, really healing and really interesting as well. So I'll make sure that you all get some details for that as well. That is a really interesting question. So I've got an interesting, can the shadow get detached from the self? So that's an interesting question. No, I'm going to say no, that's not really it. I mean, it might be out of the light of the awareness, in terms of if we're categorizing shadow in the way that I have. It's not going to be detached from the self, but in other cases outside of archetypal psychology, things like that can happen. So if you want to maybe, I could give you some more information about that. But in terms of archetypes, we wouldn't really want that to happen. So it's better if we're able to integrate everything together. I think if you mean that, I mean, there's different ways to interpret that. If you mean like, would we just get rid of our shadow? And it doesn't really work like that. It needs to be integrated, which means, because it's also part of you, right? It's not that it's a bad thing. It's just things that we haven't been able to acknowledge. We haven't been able to accept. So therefore we hide it from ourselves and from other people. So it's not, again, it's not that we want to erase it, because it's also valuable, and it's also something that we need to accept and love as well. It's just that we want to integrate it, if that makes sense. So you might have a little bit of it in different areas of your life, rather than it being this big thing that we've, because it can become like a monster, and we don't acknowledge it. But when it's integrated, it's just there in small pieces throughout the day, throughout the week. I hope that makes sense. This is Marilyn. Okay. Oh, wonderful. Yeah. So yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, I'd love to have conversations with everyone. I know there's a Jungian psychologist on here as well. So just so you know, I did mention it. because I mean, I have a background, my background in psychology as well, but I actually work as a psychotherapist because I like to integrate these spiritual modalities, and I work with mindfulness. So yeah, I use CBT, but I also work with mindfulness. I do like solution-focused therapy. I'm very integrative. So this is, yes, it's based on the work of Carl Jung, but then it's also based on Carolyn Myss as well, who's a spiritual teacher, and then a lot of workshops and trainings that I've done in the UK as well, on psychodrama, which is when you start to act out. And you know, there's a Gestalt tool that I'm sure you've come across, which we call the chair exercise. That, for example, if I'm with a client and they're behaving in a certain way, I'll pretend to be them so that they can then understand, like I'll use their voice and I'll use their language and their sentences, how they're explaining maybe something like anxiety, and then I'll get them to be me and they have to advise me, and then they have these aha moments. So it's the same when we act out the archetypes. It's very interesting because people have these aha moments of like, oh wow, you know, I keep attracting this situation to my life because of this way, or this has affected me because of this. And it's, yeah, it's really interesting. So thank you. I'm at Illuminations during the week. If anyone would like to come and have a session, we can chat further. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, if anyone has any more questions, just let me know. I'll stay on for another few minutes. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to yeah, okay, how to get rid of an archetype that we don't like. Yep, through coming to speak to someone like me. Okay, thank you. Yeah, just, I mean, if you want to come and have a chat about it, because again, as I said to Marilyn, it's not that we want to get rid of it, and that attitude of getting rid of it would create a very big shadow. And you know, the shadow can sometimes cause issues for us, because sometimes, you know, it's acting in ways that you know, we're not fully conscious of, and it's causing a lot of problems for us. So it's actually about integrating it and having acceptance. So I'd love to explain that a bit more, because it sounds like it's something scary, because it's like, well, I don't like this, why would I integrate it? But the thing is, when you integrate it with everything, it becomes just a very small part. You know, that it's intertwined with everything else, so it's not as big and it's not as scary, and you might not even, you know, think in that same way that you don't like it. And I'm sure they all have some benefits, even if it's difficult to see. So it would be great to have more of a discussion with you as well about that, and see how, you know, how we can help, how we can integrate it, help you to accept some of the lessons that the archetype is bringing you. Because I think until you get the lessons, you're kind of I'm going to say fated to repeat. So I forgot to show you one of my favorite quotes from Carl Jung, is until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. So that's something that's very important to notice. And I've got one more question here. Is shadow energy transferable? Is shadow energy transferable? Let me have a think about that. Yeah, I mean, all energy is transferable, so it's a part of you. And I think, you know, like, as I've said, you can definitely attract based on your shadow. So if you have, you know, fear, anger, hatred, things that are in, you know, in your shadow, and I mean, it doesn't have to be that you're completely not aware of it, but you might be just aware of the tip of the iceberg, right? And then, you know, you've got this iceberg metaphor where everything's underneath. You can be attracting your relationships based on your shadow. That's why I'm saying it's really important for everyone to address this, because, you know, you're a lot of this is guiding your life, directing your life, making you take actions that you're not necessarily aware of. So, you know, we need to integrate these things, because then you know, we're be able to have a life that we want based on our authentic self, not based on these archetypes that we created as defense mechanisms a lot of the time. So it's very important to try and do some of this. It also gives you a lot more energy. So shadow energy, when you kind of release this and stop hiding it, it actually gives you a lot of energy, which is also very interesting because you're spending a lot of energy repressing it. So when it is in inner conscious awareness, you've got a lot more energy, which is really nice. So how does the archetype progress in living life? How does it progress in living life? That's an interesting question. How does it progress? I mean, I'm not really sure what you mean by that, but when people have this awareness of their archetypes and they learn the lessons, I mean, then you can start to draw on the benefits of the archetypes, or you might decide that you might, because I mean, some of them I would say, they've all got benefits, but some of them are a little bit less helpful than others. Like a victim archetype's not really that helpful. So when you become aware of that, you're able to stop doing that and maybe start to attract more situations that are fair, where you're not being not abusive situations, where you're being treated in a negative way. So that could be one answer to your question. Yeah, so I think one more. Thank you. Okay, thank you too. But yeah, I'm available at Illuminations. If anyone would like to chat further or do some more archetype work, you'll be able to find me there. Okay, so I hope everyone has a lovely evening. It's really great having this hour with you, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend too. Oh. Oh, hello, hi. Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Thanks, everyone. Hi, Hadra. It's nice to see you. Okay, on here. Okay, perfect. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Thank you.